Welcome to my review of the access for disability, or at least people with my disabilities, at Alton Towers and CBeebies Land Hotel. My partner and I took my two kids, my 2-year-old and my 14-year-old, on the 10th of October 2022, and this is based on what we experienced there, particularly at the hotel. I've got a few different problems, but my main thing is fibromyalgia, which causes intense pain all over, and fatigue, headaches, dry eyes, depression, trouble focusing, trouble sleeping, indigestion, digestive problems, all sorts of things. And things can make me flare up, including overexertion and stress. And so I always knew this was going to be a tricky visit, and I did everything I could in advance to plan for it. It was for my 2-year-old's birthday, and this was her face when we got there, and honestly this is the reason why I think anybody would do this, and it definitely did make it worthwhile seeing her reactions as I was there. So I'm not saying I'd never go back, but there are a few things that they should be aware of don't actually help. So knowing that my fatigue comes on really fast and I would definitely need to be able to rest, we booked the hotel and 2-day tickets so that we could pace ourselves and not overdo things. And Alton Towers expressly says that there's accessibility and that the hotel has got accessible rooms. So I believed I was doing the right thing and that the rooms would be suitable for me, and they're not. One of the things I did do before we went was check on the Accessible website all the different features of the resort, and it's something that the Alton Towers website leads you to check. And it's really good and helpful with pictures, so you can see where you're going to and what you're looking at. The problem is I assumed that meant they'd got a good report on it, and I didn't properly stop and read every single point and what that meant in reality for me and my disabilities. For the CBeebies Hotel, it starts off really well. Its entrance to the door is clearly signed. You can get in there, it's step-free. You don't get any problems with the weathers. Obviously, with some people with visual impairments could possibly struggle, but I was okay. They open automatically and everything was quite doable. Inside though, you'll notice straight away there's nowhere to sit. So I had to use my walking rollator from the car to be able to get in and check in. Now, when you come to check in, that's another problem, which I'll cover. So once you made your booking, throughout that time, they keep sending you reminders about how you can check in, and you can actually check in via your phone or website, whatever, from the day before. And to me, check-in means you check in and they're giving you keys, and that is a big misunderstanding. They do not let you in your room as soon as you get there. It's advertised on the website that you can check in to the rooms for CBeebies Hotel from 2 p.m. And yes, you can check in, but they don't give you your keys. And this was a big error on, misunderstanding error, major inconvenience for us, is that because you've got free car parking at the hotels, we thought we would park in the disabled parking there, go in, drop our stuff off, be out there by about 3 and go and have an hour in Alton Towers and just have a wander around and see where things were. But that was completely not possible to do at all. We got there about 2:30, and the lady in reception was lovely, the staff were all lovely, and they basically gave us a lanyard so we could stay on site and go and sit down somewhere. But so reception, there's no seating. If you're waiting, you've got to have something to sit on if you need to sit. The entertainment room was brilliant for the kids, and I'd already lost my little one, happily playing with other kids, watching Bluey, and so it was no big deal straight away to just go and sit and wait in there for what we thought would be about half an hour. We were told we could get food and it wasn't a problem. The chairs were a problem for me because, as you can see, there are no backs on most of them and definitely no arms on them. And so I had to sit on my walker, which is possible, but it's not the most comfortable of seats. But, you do these things when you first get somewhere, don't you? And you make it through. But we did find, as it started to get busier and other people arrived, it got so noisy in there and it was so dark both my kids couldn't process the sensory information coming at them, and they just completely got overwhelmed with all the different flashing lights and the loudness of the noise. And the kids that just, I mean, I've been to Butlins years and years and years over time. I've had children a long time, but my God, the noise of those kids was amazing. But it was just, it was so many. I mean, the kids were so happy, but it was noisy in there, and my own two just couldn't cope anymore. So we had to go and sit in the bar area. The thing was, though, that the characters started to come out and meet the kids, and I wouldn't have missed this for the world, so that was good. Now, the bar area, we were told, had got food, so we went and sat there, still very close to the meadow area where it's really, really loud, but they could at least breathe a little bit and there wasn't people in their space. But the only food they actually sold was Pringles, and it was still quite loud, but I could at least get them a bit of air, and it wasn't quite so dark there, and they were a bit more relaxed there. My eldest one's got real sensory processing issues, but my littlest one, we discovered, just likes to scream if it gets too flashing and noisy. So that was all good fun. At that point, it was about 3:45, and we were really, really just needing to get the keys and just get rested. My fatigue was getting worse and worse and worse as well. We finally got the message at 3:50 to go and get our keys, which meant going to the reception and queuing up behind a tablet to go and issue your own keys, and then get up to your room. Now, to get to the accessible room, you had to go in a lift because it wasn't on the ground floor, so goodness only knows what happens if there's an emergency. The lifts are small and they basically fit one family in, and there's 2 of them, so getting there and getting up to the room wasn't so bad. There are buttons and things to turn the noises and lights off. There's a lot of going on in those lifts, but it was fine for us. It wasn't one of our issues, so we quite like the lifts. The only problem was it did worry me at what would happen in an emergency, and the fact that everybody else had to use the same lifts, which became a problem coming out the next day. You had to wait for ages for a lift. It wouldn't have been possible to use the lift if you were an independent person, and without a carer. You need somebody there with you, because it's just not possible if you're deaf, blind, or trying to manoeuvre a wheelchair. You just can't do it on your own. Once you get out the lift, you're presented with heavy double doors that open towards you that you can't open yourself if you're in a wheelchair, or using a walker. So you need somebody with you for that too. And the same with the door to the room. You need somebody to do that, really. It opens inwards, that one. And this is the room. It's a lovely big room. Absolutely love it. And the kids loved it when we came in. It's colourful, it's bright, it's so aimed at children. It's fabulous. The bed they particularly liked. But if you can see here, my son sat on the bed with his feet dangling about 6 inches off the floor. My son's about 5'10", 5'11". So me at 5'5", I actually couldn't get on the bed very easily, and it really hurt my back trying to climb into it. But it was something that I had to do and get a bit of help off my partner. It's a very, very high bed, just as a warning, which could be brilliant for some people, but it wasn't for us. Beds have got plug sockets right next to the bed, which was fabulous. This is something that doesn't happen very often. I have sleep apnea and I have to use a mask to help me breathe, and I always need to plug that in overnight, so having that next to the bed was a big plus for me. Another thing we noticed, although we'd booked a family room because we're a family and my kids are still kids, the beds weren't really suitable for my two's age group. Because the double bed was too high, I couldn't have the little one on the double bed without her falling off. But she was a bit scared in the other room, so she ended up sleeping on the floor next to us on a mattress. My son was happy in the other room on his own, but he's, as I say, he's like 5'10" or so, and the beds weren't normal length beds, they were child size length beds, so he had to get both the other 2 mattresses out and put them on the floor and have a bed on the floor in there. They both quite like that room. There's some place things on the wall. There's like a tablet that they're supposed to use on the wall, but we couldn't get that to work. I'm not sure how that works, but son was perfectly happy in there anyway, and little one was happy when she was awake in the room. So not major problems, but something to think of if you've got children. It looks child friendly, but it's not necessarily usable friendly for children. We couldn't have used the cot on my 2-year-old because we know she's too big for a cot, because she's been out of a cot for like about a year now. She wouldn't have fitted in the cot either, so not great from a point of view for their comfort there, really. So back to accessibility, the website says they have accessible rooms, but I would say they absolutely do not have them at all. They are not accessible rooms. If you look at the facilities on the website, what's available in the accessible rooms, it's basically some pull cords and some handles. It's not set up for somebody who's disabled, but independent. It's not necessarily set up for an adult disabled person either. The wardrobe rails are right up high, so you can't use the wardrobe. You can't use the fixtures and fittings in the bathroom. It's just, you can't open the doors. It's really, really hard. And the seats, none of the seats have got arms on, so you can't ever push yourself up or use one of the other seats. And you can't get in and out of the bed. But the bathroom was the bit that really, really bothered me, because after the hard day travelling, a bath can really, really help my pain. And I'd got an accessible bathroom, hopefully, because it's an accessible room. But it turned out that was a massive disappointment for us, and actually caused quite a few problems. No particular order then. One of the problems with the bathroom was the sink. There was a low sink positioned right by the toilet, and if you can see, I'm sat clothed, I'll let you know, on the toilet. My knees are hitting the sink, so you can't sit with your knees facing forward. You have to sort of sit sideways onto the toilet, which then means you're not using it properly. And again, I'm only 5'5", and my legs are not that long, so they were causing a real problem for my son and my partner if they needed to sit. It's like the sink's been put there as an afterthought, and it's not been planned out properly. Notice the toilet roll sat on the sink. That's because the toilet roll holder was here. It's actually behind you on your left-hand side. So for me, I would have had to have turned or reached over my shoulder, and I can't move that. That's one of my things, my disabilities. I can't lift my arms or turn or reach anywhere. I can't brush my hair. I can't put rollers in. I can't put makeup on without help, because I can't reach. So I would have had to have called somebody else in to reach the toilet paper for me, basically. The toilet roll should be sort of near to where your hands are, which is obviously near to where the sink is. The toilet roll holder really should have been there. Also, you'll see the disabled cord, pull cord, is wrapped around the handle below it, which I think is an illegal move, but it doesn't matter because you can't actually reach the pull cord anyway if you had a problem, but we'll come on to that. But yeah, the pull cord was wrapped around the handle too. Pull cord is behind you, right up at the left-hand corner. So you'd have to sort of, if you had an accident, you couldn't reach it because it's not dangling down, but also you're going to fall forwards or off to your right from the toilet. So you'd be in that space there. I can't see how you'd be in a position where you could pull that pull cord if you was in trouble, other than if you were sat on the toilet. But then you wouldn't be sat there facing the right way because you can't put your knees forward because of the sink being there. Also, you had to sort of stand up and reach over the toilet to be able to reach it. And it's the same with the flush. The flush isn't one of those like paddle flushes, it's a push-in one. I've got arthritis in both wrists, I can't push. So I was having to get other people to flush the toilet for me as well, which was embarrassing. And I had to put the chair into the bathroom to be able to move around safely in there because it just wasn't safe. The chair was stained and it's got no arms on it, so it was pretty useless as a chair anyway. So the bath very much isn't accessible at all. It's a normal height bath, but it's not a normal length bath. That will come up in a bit. But there's no handles, not even ones built into the sink, into the bath itself, which you can get. You can't get in there, basically. The same with the shower. You can't reach the shower. You can't reach the towels because they're too low down. I can't bend. Or too far across. Again, I can't bend. I can't reach. The spare toilet roll, I would have had to... I mean, I was with other people. It wasn't the end of the world. You can't work out how the cold water comes out. But what actually happens is it only comes out... The hot water has got a limiter on it, which as a mum, I totally get that. I'm really happy for that. Except... it didn't need to have a limit on it because I think everybody must have come back from the day and had a bath, and there wasn't any hot water in our room. We could go just to sort of lukewarm temperature, so it wouldn't have been possible to have a bath even if I could have got in and out of it. Now, as you can see, all this is on the accessible website, but me being me thought that Alton Towers wouldn't be saying, hey, look, we've been judged and this is our report, if it actually said they were rubbish. So I didn't actually look at the measurements. You know, I didn't think these things through properly, if I'm honest, because they said it was accessible. It tells you the height of the bed. I didn't think how much 78 centimetres was up against the side of my legs. I didn't look at the desk heights and things and the knee recesses. It's not something I've ever had to consider before in an accessible room because they usually are accessible. there's just so much detail on there. If you are going to book it, I'd really, really recommend you sit, you take the time, you get a tape measure, you look at it, because this is just not workable for an adult with disabilities at all. So the floor's a regular tiled floor as well, so it gets really, really slippery. So when you've got a dodgy back like me, it just doesn't help. Just the odd little slip doesn't help. It tells you the details. It tells you that there's not a hand-operated fixed soap dispenser. There's not. It was a Hey Dougie themed Carex bottle, which was brilliant for the kids. They loved it. But again, weak wrists, it's really, really hard to use it. Also, you can't use it and you can't use it one-handed, so you need two hands and it gets a bit tricky. But anyway, still managed to do it. The grab rails are on the wall, but they're behind you. Again, as an adult, they sit behind you. So a child disabled probably would find them useful, but you can't put any sort of weight on them because of the way they're positioned when you're my size and my disabilities. The taps are twist taps. Again, that wrist action's got to be used. The bath is at least 50 centimetres shorter, so the average is longer than the one that's provided in the Alton Towers room. Again, 5'5", I'm sat there in the bath with my knees up in a V when I did manage to get in there, and then that's when I found out the water was cold, so that was good. Yeah, stuck in the bath, really not very happy, and I was waiting for my food to come, and then we come on to another story now. So when we first booked, we booked a table rather, in the restaurant, but we looked at the menu and realised that the kids would never have ate most of it, and I certainly wouldn't, because I've got a lot of food intolerances. So I was quite pleased to see you could get room service, and I ordered it about 6:30. I ordered basically chips for myself because that's all I can eat off the menu, but it didn't matter, I'm quite used to that. They do say about food intolerances, but when you sort of can't eat a lot of things, it gets a bit boring reading it all off, so I'll just go with chips, I'm okay. But anyway, after about an hour, we started to wonder where the food was and tried to chase it up. And we tried to phone, but we kept hearing a phone ringing. All the time we were staying there, you could hear a phone bleeping in the background. So whether we were above the office or reception or like the food kitchen, a phone, I don't know, but there was something phoning all the time. When we tried to phone downstairs to find where the food was, or phone reception, the phone wouldn't connect. It was just ringing out and telling us to disconnect. So I went online and used the messaging systems that they've got online, and all of those are basically a robot chat assistant just told me it was too stupid to answer my question, which really didn't help. So my partner had to leave me and the kids, one of which had gone to sleep by now, and go downstairs to reception and complain about the food. We don't mind waiting, I'm quite used to waiting. I could have waited an hour and a half if that's what we'd been told, it didn't matter. But basically what had happened was, when he actually spoke to the manager of the restaurant, the printer hadn't printed out our order, so they had no knowledge of it. And fair play, again, you can't knock the staff at this place, the staff are amazing. She sorted it all out for us and refunded us, so it's no big deal, it was dealt with. But as a result, one child went to bed hungry. I was so stressed and faint at that point, I couldn't properly eat. And we had the food, but we didn't eat it all. Food was really expensive. It's Alton Towers, I expected it to be. But the food we had was really, really good quality as well. So I can't really knock the price of it. It was just the problems trying to get hold of what had happened to it. Again, next morning we booked a table. The restaurant's very simple. It's Butlin style, again, buffet. Food was lovely. Little one was really happy to have her melon, and Little Monster greeted us as we came out the lift as well, so that was good. Sensory wise, it was too overwhelming for my son, and he was basically finishing off what was left of the dessert box from last night for his breakfast. It's again very, very loud in there, lots and lots of people, lots of squeaky loud children. There isn't any adaptive cutlery or cups, so you need to make sure you've got your own. And it's you get up yourself to go and get the food. So as a walker user, I really quite struggled because I couldn't really do that, but I did. The staff are lovely, they would have helped. Between us we managed, but it's not a nice, calm, leisurely breakfast. It's a high noise, high colour, high action breakfast that you just sort of go up, grab what you can, come back and eat it. Having not been able to use the day before's tickets anyway, this never actually came up, but it would have done, because because we'd looked into it once we'd arrived at the hotel, obviously, but it's something for you to know. The disabled parking at the hotels is free, and it's suggested you use the monorail to Alton Towers Resort. But if you're in the CBeebies hotel, you've got, according to Google, it's a 7-minute walk. So for me, probably about 45-minute walk, because I walk really slowly, to the monorail station in the first place before you get to the Alton Towers Resort. So depending on what your disabilities are, that whole parking up at the hotel and getting the monorail may not be possible for you. So just check that out in advance first as well. So we'd lost the use of the 1-day ticket, so determined to use the second day, we decided to drive around the disabled parking, and as it says, follow the signs. The signage isn't brilliant, but the staff are brilliant. Again, the staff are what makes this place. They just guide you, they tell you where to go. When you get to the car park, look at this picture here, at how vast that car park is, right? So it's close, but it's not really, because it's so big. So getting there first is great. Which we were one of the first ones. It says to pay for it and book it in advance, but you can't do that. So we had to just hope that, being one of the hotel residents, we would have got there quicker, and we did. It says it's a fairly short distance, it's like 30 metres or something, but 30 metres is beyond what you're able to walk to be able to be eligible for PIP or limited capability for work. So it's actually a very long way to walk when you're disabled. They do have mobility scooters for hire, which is brilliant, but that then means that you then don't think about what you're going to need to take, and because you're going to hire a mobility scooter. Luckily, I'd got my Rollator walker that I always use, but I had to stop probably 2 or 3 times at least to be able to actually get to the front. When you get there, there's an accessible gate, a wider gate, but there's still a queue of people. So if you're not a wheelchair disabled, you've still got a queue. You've still got a queue with everybody else. I couldn't find another way in. And so, quite honestly, I was exhausted once I'd got past the gate. And that was just the start of it, the start of the day. The good thing is a carer can get in free if they're over 14 years of age. Luckily, mine is. Mine's been a carer since he was 8, though, so that would have been awkward then. And you can do ride passes. But as I've got a bad back, I was never going to be on the rides anyway. So you can hire a mobility scooter, but you need to be able to put £50 down, and they refund you the £25, which goes in about the day after by the time you get it back. The problem is you get that from Tower Street. You can go on some attractions in your wheelchair, and it says it's easy to navigate in a wheelchair. For me, manually powered wheelchair would not have worked at all. I couldn't have done this with my manual wheelchair. The floors are flat, but they're on angles, and it's really, really awkward. It was quite awkward even with a mobility scooter, to be honest. The guest services is on Tower Street, so that's another extra long walk. Again, staff are fantastic, but added to the walk and the standing that you've just had to do, you've then got another, probably, for me it was probably about another 15-minute walk. It's not that far, but it took me a long time. They will look after your equipment for you, and get them with mobility scooter. I couldn't have done this without the mobility scooter. I would have had to have just stopped what I was doing. So I'm glad we didn't actually do the 2 days there, because I couldn't have afforded to do the mobility scooter for 2 days. As it was, I got it, and it got us to where we needed to go. So the accessible website, again, everything has been reviewed, and you'd think it would be good if it's being shown as it is, but it's not necessarily. Make sure you're checking these reviews if you're to make sure what goes with your disability is accurate. The CBeebies land, luckily, was one of the first things to come to. I couldn't have travelled any further, even with the mobility scooter, because sitting up can affect me as well. I couldn't have got to the quiet place should I ever needed it. Luckily, I got my own radar key. It's so spacious there. I mean, it's fabulous. It's so spacious. But when you can't walk or access things, it's actually just too far. It's just, it could be miles away. The staff at the gates were lovely. The staff and guest services were lovely. All the mascots were friendly. But as you see, all the paths are slopes. Some are like slopes sideways instead of up and down in front of you, if that makes sense. Adverse camber, I think they call it on the road. And so you're having to access things by going, but either if you're walking, you've got to put extra exertion in. if you're in the mobility scooter, it becomes a bit unbalanced, especially if you're not actually used to it, like I wasn't. But luckily I can drive. The passes for the rides have to be ordered in advance. Again, I didn't experience all this. My view of CBeebies Land was basically from the gates of every entrance, just watching the kids go around, and they seemed to have had a great time. I mean, they had a lovely, lovely day out. The boat ride I couldn't have done because of my back. A lot of the times, like it says, you have to be able to hold yourself up and like resist pressures and things. Again, I couldn't have done that, so I just kept off the rides. It was easier. The rides, we got there just as it opened, and it was too busy for my kids to cope with by about 12. So we spent a lot of the time just in the big fun time area, where she got to see the Teletubbies and Hey Duggee. Didn't think much of Hey Duggee. She walked off on that one, but she loved the Teletubbies. The big problem you have as well navigating is the other people. The other people will not move out of the way if you're in a mobility scooter. They don't care that you can't move. They've got a buggy and they can't move. You can't always access, go around shops, and so the ride queues, you'd never be able to navigate with a wheelchair. They let you in at a different entrance, I think, for that. But the other people are very, very ignorant. They're in their own worlds, and there are a lot of people. And for me, coming out, I mean, we're quite a way out of COVID now, but I'm not used to the busy places, so I really struggled with that. Little one just wanted to run around, and so she found she got a shadow that day, so that was quite nice. The drinks facilities and the refreshment facilities are expensive, but it's Alton Towers and you expect it, but they're not always open. We found that we had to sit in the big fun show time area most of the time because it was the only way we could cope with doing a ride and then sitting and resting. And it was a very slow day, and for us, I mean, for me, it wasn't really worth money. It was way too expensive for what we did, and there was no way we could ever have done the full park, even with the mobility scooter. But then CBeebies was all we went for anyway. Again, with looking at the reports on the accessible website, check those measurements that they give you. Check the widths and the heights of things, because when you're actually there, you suddenly realise, like how tall a metre actually is, if you've got to sort of go over it, or how steep an incline something can be. The staff were very good on this particular ride, the Octonauts ride. They don't let you use mobile phones on there, and they will just literally stop the ride and kick you off, which I think is really good, because there's so many people doing like what I'm doing now, but I'm doing it in retrospect, obviously. The shops were good, but again, they're going to want things once you go into a shop. They're going to want things. But both of my two loved these ducks and this pile of mud, and we spent more time with this ducks and these pile of mud than we did on any other ride or in any other place. So lesson learned there. So on the whole, I knew it was expensive, but it definitely wasn't worth the money. It's definitely not accessible. It is not for me and my disability. So fibromyalgia, arthritis, adults with disabilities. Maybe the children might have been better in those rooms with help from parents. You can't be independent. You have to go with a carer. You can't do anything by yourself. Anything that you've tried to do through your life to make things easier for yourself suddenly don't work there. There's an assumption that anybody who's disabled is just in a wheelchair and doesn't do anything anyway. But then, so your disabled spaces are as close as they can be, but they're still far, far, far too far away. And then you've got more walking to get the mobility scooters. What they can actually do about it, I don't know, because the ground that they've got there is quite limited. Glad we went, but I've got absolutely no plans of ever going back. But that said, if the kids really wanted to, I would go with them, but would just not expect to do anything. Never staying in the hotels again. That was just horrendous. And the nighttime shows were just too much for the children, and I couldn't navigate it with my walker I'd got. So the stress of not being able to eat properly, not being able to rest properly, when we first got to the hotel, actually ruined the next day for us. And as a result, I've then been put into a big fibromyalgia flare and spent the last 2 weeks in bed with a mask on, trying to breathe and trying to cope with the pains. So on the whole, totally not worth it at all. Apologies for the quiet voices in this. I've been recording it as and when I've felt well. And yeah, I've just... it's not for disabled people. It is for children. Children love it. My kids loved it to bits. But it's not for disabilities at all. thank you for listening and taking the time to go through all this, and I hope it does help somebody, or at least help you to plan before you go. Really read that accessible website as much as you can.